Evening, everybody. Welcome to Horsham Planning North Committee. Couple of bits of housekeeping before we get going. Welcome, first of all, members, and welcome members of the public. Exits are in that corner and that corner. There are no fire alarm drills planned for tonight, so if the bell rings, we'll need to leave and make our way to the bandstand. The meeting is live streamed. Please make sure your phones are on silent or off. Members, please remember to turn your mics on and off. And just a word of warning, there's a trailing lead. So if you make your way around for a coffee at any stage, please be mindful of that. Speakers will be kept to time. You have 2 minutes. I think there's a parish councillor who gets 5 minutes. Judy will keep the time and you'll be called to a halt at time. And over to the officers, please, to introduce themselves.
Stephen G, Principal Transport Planner at West Sussex County Council.
Jason Hawkes, Principal Planning Officer, Horsham.
It's Matthew Porter, Senior Planning Officer.
Emma Parks, the Head of Development and Building Control.
Claire Brown, Principal Planning Solicitor. Judy Carboni, Democratic Services Officer.
Great, thanks. Apologies for absence, please.
We have apologies from Councillor Ellis Brown, Councillor Kitchen, Councillor Lander-Yu, Councillor Mercer, Councillor Skip, and Councillor Utan.
Any other apologies? Thank you very much. Minutes from the previous meeting. Hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look at those. Anybody want to raise anything for the previous minutes? So we'll approve those if agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Declarations and members' interest, please. No members' interests. Excellent. I don't have any announcements. The appeals are tabled. So if anybody would like to raise anything on those, otherwise we'll move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is DC 23-1133, Highway Depot A24 exit Slip Road, northbound Broadbridge Heath. Over to you, officers.
Good evening, members. Members will be aware from written addendum that since the publication of this committee agenda, there's been a further 6 letters of objection received. Those raise no new issues other than already reported in the committee agenda. There's been further representation also from Tesco Stores Limited, and they raise 3 matters. That the proposal is prejudicial to other beneficial uses in the Broadbridge Heath opportunity area, that the retail sequential approach is breached due to suitability and availability of the former Wilko store in Horsham Town Centre, and a lack of condition to restrict the permission to discount retailing. So the slide that's viewable now is the site, which is in Broadbridge Heath, bounded by highway, the Tesco Extra supermarket store to the south, and Broadbridge Retail Park to the north. The area is mixed residential and commercial character with low to mid-rise buildings. The Bridge Leisure Centre is beyond the Tesco Extra car park. The existing site's a vehicle depot that ceased operating. It comprises concrete hardstanding, buildings, fuel storage tanks. The site is accessed from the west from Broadbridge Heath Way, Wickhurst Lane, and to the east from a connector road off the A24. So this brownfield redevelopment proposal compromises a retail park format, 4 new buildings with associated car park and works. The total gross internal floor space area is some 50,000 square metres, with some 150 jobs forecast. There's a total of 230 car parking spaces with active, rapid and future rapid EV charging and 108 cycle spaces. Buildings are designed with tailored elements whilst also providing for the occupiers' requirements, those being a discount food retailer, a DIY garden centre, a drive-through coffee shop and a drive-through restaurant. So as shown on the slide, the site's outside the defined town centre boundary of Horsham, within the built-up area boundary of Broadbridge Heath, and within the Broadbridge Heath opportunity area, and those are all defined by local plan policy. As evidenced by the applicant and detailed in the committee report, the nature, scale, and the quantum of the proposed redevelopment will reinforce the role of the opportunity area as a successful outer town centre, and it would not adversely affect the existing and future offer of Horsham Town Centre. That's balanced against a trade draw shown to be negligible to vitality and viability. The wording of policy 6 is not prescriptive to a mix of uses, and regarding the required planning retail tests, which in your officers' views have been passed satisfactorily, the Wilko store in Horsham Town Centre is no longer available, and the planning condition set out in the written addendum would ensure delivery of discount retailing within the scheme. So the overall access strategy is for Whithurst Lane to be the primary site entry. Customer entry and exit would be via a new mini roundabout on Whithurst Lane. The service vehicle entry and exit will be via the existing A24 connector road to the east. The new mini roundabout incorporates the old Whithurst Lane junction. It's been subject to a stage 1 road safety audit and designer's response, with no concern to cyclist safety raised. Its design has been amended to incorporate cycle slipways. Your officers recognise the concerns from the community and elsewhere around highway impacts brought about by this development. The access and the parking arrangements as presented are deemed satisfactory in the professional experience of the local highway authority. And this includes the site being safely accessed and operating without severe impact on the highway network. The site will be accessible via the local cycle network, and there will be a shared use facility along Whithurst Lane at the site access, which will provide cyclists with an off-road route to the residential areas north and south of the site. There's 3 pedestrian entrances proposed, including a route into the adjacent retail park to the north via Broadbridge Way. So in conclusion, your officers are duty bound to determine the application as submitted. The applicant submits mitigations and enhancements to address all material planning considerations in the view of your officers, as detailed in the committee report, and that includes air quality mitigation, biodiversity gain off-site, demonstration of water neutrality, and the limitation of harms to neighbouring receptors by way of the development layout and construction and operational restrictions. So in overall summary, in your officer's view, there is compliance with the criteria requirements of policy 6 in the HDPF and in accordance with the current development plan and the MPPF as a whole.
Thanks very much. Okay, we have, no, sorry, no, there's no, you can speak if your name is down here.
It's about acronyms. I just wondered if somebody could just avoid acronyms when they're speaking.
I'm sure we can do that. We'll make it as clear as possible. Sarah Quinn, please.
Hi, my name is Sarah Quinn. I have lived in Horsham for 20 years. I moved to Wickhurst Green and I live on Sergeant Way, and I've lived there for the last 8 years. In the time that the road at the top of Sergeant Way, so the road in front of the co-op, was closed, the impact to traffic on Sergeant Way has been catastrophic. I actually stood at my window on Saturday morning, and within 6 minutes, 45 cars had driven past my house. Sergeant Way is now used as a rat run to cater for people cutting through to rejoin on the A281. No one is using the new bypass, as far as I know. Everyone is using Sergeant Way. By creating this development, you are going to enforce traffic down Sergeant Way even more. There is no way that there is any solution to this without closing off the top of Sergeant Way that you can stop Sergeant Way and Wickhurst Green becoming a rat run. 8 years ago, when I moved into Wickhurst Green, this is not the house that I bought. These were not the plans that we signed up for when we purchased our property. I would like to understand from the council what their proposals are for ensuring that Sergeant Way is no longer used as a rat run, which will be made 1,000 times worse by building this development. And as far as I saw from the addendum that was added today, which I only read through briefly because I was at work, the plans are not drawn up in a way that it shows the impact on Sergeant Way. There was a sentence in the addendum about that. So I'd like to understand if that is going to be reflected, if that's going to be updated to reflect the impact that it will have on Sergeant Way and the residents within.
Thanks, Sarah. What will happen is each of you will speak and then the officers will reply following that.
Okay, well, in addition to that, I would also
Sorry,
like
no, that's time, Sarah.
that's time.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Catherine Edwards, please.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today to contest the planning approval for the McDonald's and Starbucks specifically. These drive-through restaurants next to Tesco's, I'm sure you're aware that unless they are less than half a mile from Townbridge House School, and it's on a walking route to and from Broadbridge Heath and Wickhurst Green. At a time when 1 in 3 children growing up in England face a future of food-related illness, I welcome Labour's vision to create the healthiest generation of children ever. Keir Starmer said in June of this year, there are no more important indicator of the state of the country than the well-being of its children. The future is our children, and today they are suffering. In the Child Health Action Plan, number 10, sadly, not number 1 on the list, is to stop the targeting of school children by fast food outlets, by empowering councils to block the development of new fast food shops outside schools. We need to hold big food companies to account, stop them flooding us with junk food and manipulating us with their misleading marketing tactics. I would like to see a level playing field for some more progressive businesses that aren't penalised for their creating healthier and more affordable options. How will the school canteens menu, which is required to meet the food standards, compete with a menu that is predominantly high in sugar, fat and salt? Today, I would like to ask Horsham District Council to consider putting the needs of our children first by blocking this application.
Thank you, Catherine. Lauren Stokes, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lauren Stokes from Lambert Smith Hampton, speaking on behalf of the applicant, West Sussex County Council, in support of the proposals at Broadbridge Heath Highways Depot. The application put to you today complies with the development plan and national planning policy, enabling development of a vacant brownfield site. The site forms part of the Broadbridge Heath Quadrant Opportunity Area, which supports the development of town centre uses. Currently an unattractive, underutilised site, the proposals accord with the allocation, delivering a high-quality retail scheme that complements existing retailers in Horsham town centre. The scheme will improve access to affordable groceries for surrounding residents and the wider catchment through a new Lidl store, plus a new major DIY retail brand. The retail impact assessment confirms the proposals will not have a significant impact on the vitality and viability of Horsham town centre. Instead, the proposed retail will mostly draw trade from other out-of-town centre stores in Horsham district and beyond. The proposals are strongly supported by Horsham's economic development team. Over 150 new jobs will be created, and the proposed retail uses will help to retain resident expenditure within the district, strengthening Horsham's retail profile. The Highways Authority have raised no objection to the proposals, which will integrate with the surrounding pedestrian and cycle networks via safe, legible access routes, encouraging active travel to and through the site, which is currently impossible. Biodiversity net gain is achieved, and native shrub and tree planting ensures year-round greening. The proposals achieve water neutrality, will deliver buildings of BREEAM Very Good standard, and provide electric vehicle charging. This development will secure Section 106 contributions towards sustainability measures and public art, plus over £170,000 of SIL contributions. To conclude, the proposals will help to deliver the Council's long-term aspirations for the Broadbridge Heath Quadrant allocation. The proposals provide numerous planning benefits, resulting in significant economic, social and environmental gain to the residents of Broadbridge Heath and beyond. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Any response from the officers?
Yeah, so just to come back on a couple of points. In terms of issues around food offer, what we're looking at is the land use planning, so not the end user. I know there's reference to a discount retailer within the application, but obviously we don't have consideration of the named operator. So what we're looking at is a drive-through restaurant. And that's basically how planning land use decisions are made.
Sorry, you have to remain silent, please.
In terms of the rat run issue, it is recognised that's a community concern, but the highway modelling has come out with the result that it wouldn't exasperate that to a severe impact on the highway network, which is a test of national policy. So obviously we've got a representative from the highway department here who could ask any questions further on that.
Do you have anything to add from West Sussex at this stage? Okay, we'll wait for the members to say that. You take questions from members. Okay, so let's move on to the members then. Councillor Brooks, your ward.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is one of the most frustrating and unpleasant experiences that I have in my experience as being a councillor. We have an application before us that has the potential and the opportunity to deliver very many and very significant benefits to my ward and Broadbridge Heath, but also to the wider district. And the economic and employment benefits that have been touched on here and that are more that are outlined in greater detail within the application itself are significant, and particularly the economic and employment benefits that might well be accessed directly by residents of Broadbridge Heath, and those are to be welcomed. And a majority of the written responses to this application from members of the public seem to recognise those benefits and as a result welcome the application. Nevertheless, I can't help but feel that this application draws our attention to a number of opportunities that are not being taken and that might well be being missed. I have the most profound sympathy for the points expressed, particularly by Ms. Quinn, concerning the very, very significant impact that residents already suffer from traffic and road design in Broadbridge Heath. Just for clarity for members who might not be familiar with it, Sergeant Way is a residential road that accesses, and thank you very much, officers, for bringing up the map. That's no problem. It accesses Broadbridge Way, what some might have colloquially referred to in the past as the old Broadbridge Heath bypass. This is but one of a number of areas where traffic flow is a significant problem, and West Sussex County Council Highways have recognised that and have, as recently as last week, submitted some renewed data of traffic surveys in exploring known issues. Nevertheless, we have the professional opinion of the West Sussex County Council Highways officers in response to this report saying that it is not considered that any additional impact that this development would make is unacceptable. And Brutus is an honourable man. If we were to, as non-professionals, disagree with that assessment and use that as a reason to refuse this application, that would be subject, as I understand it, to it would open the possibility that our decision could be appealed, and a planning inspector would look at the professional opinion of West Sussex Highways, and they would look at the way in which that they have followed national policy, and they would find in favour, as I understand it, of that professional opinion. It is not a grounds on which, however dissatisfactory we might feel the impact might be, we can consider this. And I'm more than happy, as I have in the past, to spend time talking to residents about that particular frustration and concern. There are ways I feel that there are opportunities here that are not being taken to improve access to the site for active travel, in particular for pedestrian and cycle access, from particularly access point 1, which is of the proposed new roundabout on Wickhurst Lane, right next to Broadbridge Way. But also access between the existing retail park where Homebase is onto the proposed new retail development. I would thank officers at HDC for their work in trying to engage West Sussex to adjust the application to include some greater improvements in this. One might reasonably hope that as a public body, West Sussex County Council would be more than usually open to the idea of adjusting an application to go beyond what is merely statutory required in order to deliver public good. To my profound regret and disappointment, it does not appear that this has been the case, and that the applicant, while not West Sussex Highways, a very separate part of West Sussex County Council, have been content to meet the lowest possible bar and have not been particularly receptive at all to any efforts by our officers to request improvement. And I say request, there are limits to which we might be able to require them, though I think there are some possibilities we might discuss this evening, and I hope that some of my fellow members would be interested in debating those. The view of our officers is that this application is acceptable, and the recommendation is to approve it. It is a very, very high bar then, and we have to have a very, very good reason to even consider refusing it. And the advice that we have received is that we do not have grounds to do so. What I think it is beholden on members to consider this evening is whether or not there is some scope by which we might be able, through further work, to improve on the offer that is here, and whether or not that might best be achieved by additional conditions, or whether deferring the application for further investigation. Now, I don't want to prejudice kind of further discussion, but I know that there might be some members who have some feelings on this. I have some feelings too. I think I've talked for quite long enough at this point, and I think it's best to give other people an opportunity to speak. So thank you for your time, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Right. There are going to be some hands, I'm sure. I'm just going to bear with me because I need to try and write these down and pay attention and see what's going on, unless you'd like to write them down for me, Tony.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. In principle, this is a really welcome development, making very good economic use of a brownfield site. In practice, it's a very big development, and not everything about it is perfect. What I'd particularly like to talk about is the transport access here. I'm setting aside the point that Councillor Brooks has said about West Sussex's professional judgment about the problems on Sergeant Way, which we all agree are horrendous, but I think outside the immediate scope of this application. But access to the site, particularly by pedestrians and cyclists, is one of the areas that it has been extremely frustrating to a number of members and officers who've worked really hard over the course of this application to get improvements. So there is some history to this. West Sussex in about 2012 got a large lump of money to build a cycle route in from Broadbridge Heath to Horsham. And in the end, the section of the route that goes through the Broadbridge Heath quadrant didn't get built for financial reasons mainly. And as a consequence, our current local plan, the Horsham District Planning Framework, has a specific policy in it, policy 6.10, to attempt to redress the lack of improvements to pedestrian and cycle access that didn't happen then, because it was acknowledged by West Sussex at the time and acknowledged by Horsham District Council that the current access is insufficient. So policy 6.10 is to maximise accessibility by a range of alternative means of travel to the car, and developments are required to improve existing and create new pedestrian and cycle connections within the Broadbridge Heath quadrant and from the surrounding area. So this is quite an unusual policy in the HDPF, and it's a very site-specific policy requiring proactive improvement from the developers to make it better, not just within their red line, but within the wider quadrant and linking the quadrant to the wider area itself. The officers have put a lot of work into trying to get work with the developer and West Sussex Highways on this, and a number of members have put a lot of effort into this as well. And as Councillor Brooks says, sadly, we seem to have a range of lost opportunities here. It looks like we're not going to get a cycle path along the north of the development, just south of Broadbridge Heath, where there's currently a missing cycle and path and a not brilliant pedestrian path. The connectivity across to Old Wickhurst Lane from the north is not addressed by this design. The substandard underpass and the rather dangerous uncontrolled crossing over Broadbridge Way are not positively addressed by this either. Those are all examples of opportunities that could have been taken and haven't been. So in fact, what's happened, yes, there's connectivity within the red line, but obviously there is, because the developer needs to get people around within their site. So obviously that's new provision. But beyond that, what is there? And the answer is really not very much. There is, after some work, a new pedestrian access from the north, but not accessible to cycles. There's the latest information says that the access is going to be improved by telling people to dismount from their cycles, which doesn't really seem to be improved cycle access to me. And the new mini roundabout that's proposed definitely makes getting into the site significantly more hostile, into and out of the whole Broadbridge Heath quadrant, significantly more hostile than it was before. Previously, people could just walk or cycle straight around that corner. Now they have to negotiate a roundabout. And the pedestrian and cycle uncontrolled crossing there is incredibly cramped, and it doesn't conform to LTN 120. It doesn't really feed you on or off at all properly. It looks most unsatisfactory. So I think there are still some opportunities, quite easy wins for improvement here. One thing that I think we could still do is seek to safeguard access between this site and the Broadbridge Heath Retail Park where Telford's is, because at the moment you can't move between one and the other. Now there's a ransom strip between the two, so it's not within the it's not our job to ask the developer to negotiate with the ransom strip owner to provide that path, but I would like to see a little strip of land safeguarded just to the right of the loop for the drive-through coffee shop to link through to Broadbridge Heath Retail Park, so that if at any point in the future somebody were to decide to complete the link from the other side, that would be possible. Under the current design, it's being blocked off. And that's a very minor change that I hope we'd be able to make. A bigger change that I hope we'd be able to make is to look at how that roundabout's operating. At the moment, it's hostile for anybody who's trying to cycle on the road, and it's fiddly and awkward for both pedestrians and cyclists off the road. The opportunities to improve that do not seem to have been fully explored, particularly in line with all the latest guidance from Active Travel, from their standing advice, and LTN 120. Now, one thing that could potentially be done, the levels look reasonable at relatively low change to the current design, would be for people who are coming south on the underpass path to turn left into the car park through that green area north of the roundabout, so that pedestrians and cycles don't have to tangle with the roundabout at all. So my suggestion is that that we could look to have a condition added to the approval that land is safeguarded for potential future access through to the Halford site. And we could consider delegating this application for approval in consultation with local members to give opportunity to explore improving of the pedestrian and cycle access from the underpass route into the car park. Thank you. I think that's all I had to say.
Thanks, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Trott.
Thank you, Chair. in agreement with Councillor Fletcher. I think there are many positives in this, and I know many townsfolk who would be extremely pleased with what's going to be done here. I do have two concerns. I think one of my concerns will echo Councillor Fletcher's points about traffic and access, etc. But the primary one really echoes Ms Edwards and what she said earlier. The well-known drive-through brand that we're not allowed to say what it actually is yet. I think it's a little bit cynical putting it where it is. I am the father of two former pupils of Tambridge House Schools who walked to school every day and liberally partook of the opportunities presented by the co-op. One of my sons having quite serious health implications because of it. If there was a well-known drive-through restaurant brand in the vicinity, I'm sure that problem would be massively exacerbated. I'm also convinced that Tambridge House School management would be extremely upset by this, because this will give them all sorts of problems. I'm sure this area will turn into the dining hall of Tambridge House School in very short order. And with the initiatives that have been put out by the new government and all the health advice, this really is, in my view, a retrograde step. So therefore, if we are going to approve this, I wonder if we could explore the possibility of putting in some kind of clause about the use of the units in there that do not contravene health advice put out by central government, particularly in the vicinity of a major school. And just to add a little bit to Councillor Fletcher's points about traffic, the Broadbridge Way, the traffic on there will be enormous. And I don't see anything on there that there's any kind of mitigation for dealing with that. I mean, people will, I'm sure, be familiar with the Christmas traffic jam getting into Tesco's that backs up onto the main road. Well, that will be doubled. I'm sure there are all kinds of reasons why some of what I've said can't be done, but nevertheless, I felt I had to voice them, particularly the health implications of what we're proposing here, which will not go down well. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Trott. I think we'll go to the officers now just to sort of clear up any points made.
Thank you, Councillor Trott. Obviously, in planning, you have to consider any application in accordance with local and national planning policy, and it can't duplicate other licensing or anything else in relation to regulations. As my colleague said earlier, planning works in land use terms. So in planning, you don't approve an end user. In this case, we're approving a drive-through restaurant. In effect, any drive-through restaurant could move on to that site, and we can't prevent a certain use. We can't a particular end user, and we can't choose. That's not for the planning system to do. We're just considering that particular land use. And obviously, in planning terms, that there's nothing in our local plan or in the national planning policy framework that say that we could place certain restrictions on particular uses or end users. So whilst I completely recognise, as a parent as well, can completely recognise those local concerns, in planning terms, there is no reason in which we can impose restrictions or refuse it for that reason, because there's no policy to back up that position, no planning policy. Thank you. Sorry, there was another question, Councillor Trott, which my colleague's going to answer.
So in terms of the presentation of mitigation, there isn't any, because obviously the capacity modelling doesn't demonstrate the need for mitigation along Sergeant Way.
Sorry, I wasn't referring to Sergeant Way. I was referring to the Broadbridge Way, the access to, which will be exactly the same as it is now. 2 lanes going into one roundabout, all turning left, doing exactly the same as it is now. The Sergeant Way thing, and I think one of my colleagues will address that far more eloquently than I will.
So it's the same scenario with the Broadbridge Way, because the modelling queuing doesn't require the mitigation. There isn't any need to present any within the submission.
Sorry, could you just say that in non-council speak? So for the people that are here to object, can you explain that in more layman's terms, please?
Yeah, so we would only require mitigation, so that could be highway improvements through new changes to the road system when there isn't recognised and evidence need for it. So in this case, the applicant has done all the modelling that's necessary.
Right, okay. But
And
why
it's-
can you counter it, but I can't?
No, hang on a minute, please. We have to run within a sort of a format here, and the format is you please keep quiet.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to come back to a point that Councillor Trott has mentioned and other councillors have mentioned, and I think there's significant sympathy for Catherine's point about, you know, the fast food chain or drive-through restaurant, whatever we might call it, which shall remain nameless. However, and I understand that, and we all understand and appreciate that under planning terms, that may not be a consideration for refusal under planning committee. What I would like to ask is which part of the council, if it's not under planning, under which part of council would that discussion best be had?
I'm not aware there is, because it's not for the council to control commercial competition. I think obviously it would need a license from environmental health in terms of, but I obviously I'm not professional in other areas. I'm a planning
Okay,
professional.
thank you.
But that would be my view.
All right, thank you. All right, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. I'd really like to raise the issue raised by Sarah Quinn in respect to Sergeant Way. Could you clarify whether evidence has been provided that confirms that there will not be a significant impact upon Sergeant Way, and whether if the evidence has not been occurred, whether we can request a deferral for the evidence to be provided?
Just finding the figure now. Sorry, bear with me.
So the document the highway officer is looking at is the transport assessment that was accompanied the application, which detailed all the modelling.
So in the Friday PM peak and Saturday PM peak, which are the two busiest hours that a development like this would generate, the transport assessment anticipates a total of 34 in the Friday PM peak and 37 in the Saturday sort of midday peak, turning left from Wickhurst Lane towards Broadbridge Way. No details on the further wider distribution have been provided. What I would say is those terms of numbers wouldn't constitute a severe impact, and that's the level high bar that we'd have to look at in highways terms.
Sorry, may I just challenge those figures, because I believe Ms Quinn mentioned, was it 45?
So in any given week.
My understanding is that there were 45 cars that moved past Sergeant Way in a 10-minute period. that seems to be significantly greater than the numbers you're indicating would occur on peak Friday.
So they're numbers that would be generated by the development that I said.
So that's in addition to, yeah. So do we have any idea of the percentage increase?
I
compared to
have no
existing
traffic
flows?
figures on Sergeant's Way that have been made available as part of the application.
Thank you.
I'm happy to come in now, if only to say that part of my private frustrations with this process is that in order to sit as part of this committee, I have a responsibility not to predetermine my opinion and to keep an open mind all the way through this debate before coming to the thing. And part of ensuring that I am not predetermined is there are limits to the kinds of discussions that I might be able to have with members of the public and with my fellow members. For instance, if there were the impression that I were trying to coerce or collude with or in some way influence the judgment of my other members, that would have a very significant impact on the way in which this decision could be made and my part in it. So I can well understand the frustration of a member of the public who might think that none of these ideas or questions have occurred previously to their local member, and that they haven't thought, for instance, to ask about the impact on the roads around Broadbridge Heath, or challenged some of the figures that West Sussex County Council highways have come up with, or asked whether or not they're justifiable, whether or not they take into account a variety of different other measures, and whether or not it's something that can reasonably ask to be taken into account. As we've heard from officers this evening, and I share the frustration that members of the public have when that is presented in a technical language that isn't always easy as a layman to understand, but there is a national test for the impact of a new development. There is, as I understand it, and the officer from West Sussex County Council Highways has mentioned, a very high bar that needs to be reached for mitigation to become possible and to have to be required to form part of the plan. And that, as I alluded to in my first statement, the professional opinion of officers is that in accordance with national policy, that is not reached, and that as members here, there doesn't appear to be a great deal we can do about that. Privately, we might feel aghast, outraged, appalled, disgusted that we can't do anything about it, that we feel that these tests are not sufficient, not reflective of reality, do not take into account the impact on public good or the opportunity to ameliorate a poor situation. I dislike the impression that might be given that this hasn't occurred to us already and that we haven't done absolutely everything within our power to explore the possibility that there might be some other way. Now, asking these questions in public at this meeting is our job, but I don't want the idea in anyone's minds that by asking these questions, we're only just now coming to this realization. These, as a number of other members have recognized, are known problems, but they are not, sadly, and to my great regret, problems that are recognized by the planning process as being ones that we have any capacity to remedy or any ability to require the developer or West Sussex County Council Highways to remedy. If I've spoken anything in error, I trust that officers will be able to correct me.
No, I don't think you've spoken in error. I think that the thing here is, there are things that we might be able to suggest and work towards. What you say is totally understandable and that's fine. But I don't, let's not, we are going through a process here to try and arrive at the right decision for the local people, for the town, for the applicant and the objectors. But so let's just work through it. Let's not sort of rule anything out at this moment in time. Let's remain open-minded. We have a conversation to have here. We've had suggestions of how we might be able to improve or modify. Let's work through it and see where we land. Everybody's entitled to have a say. Sorry, no. Councillor Minto.
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of clarity, and I'd just like to welcome the colleague from West Sussex County Council. I think it's 5 years of different planning. We've been asking for someone to come along, and you've come along, so I think we need to put you through your paces. You mentioned the test is based on vehicles turning left from Broadbridge Way. Is that correct?
So junction modelling was undertaken on the whole proposal on the site access and the adjoining roundabout.
But I think you said, and it was measured on the vehicles turning left into the.
So the figures that I gave were the numbers who were turning left and going back on Broadbridge Way towards Sergeant's Way, but obviously the site will generate more trips.
Okay, so it wasn't measuring people coming through Sergeant's Way and turning right into the development. Was that overlooked or missed because the access route should predominantly be from the town direction?
There are some numbers doing that, so that's 21 in the Friday peak and 19 in the Saturday interpeak.
They're coming from Sergeant Way into the development, and then there's also a volume coming the other way as well.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And you're deeming that, I'm just trying to get an understanding of the history of Sergeant Way, which, as many people have suggested, has been ongoing for years. Now, are those figures based on the bar of the traffic that is coming through Sergeant Way, and it's on top of that? Because the bar should be 0, I think, from the Sergeant Way direction because of how the scheme was set up, and the controls essentially are failing. So I'm just wondering, if you're looking at capacity, is it extra capacity on what is currently there, or capacity on what should be there, which should be 0?
So the bar in severity is, as I said, incredibly high. So when we've tried to use it in West Sussex before, it's been delays of 20 minutes to get through a single junction, and the inspector still in that case found that it wasn't a severe delay. So that's how high it is. In terms of Sergeant's Way, I mean, the figures given could also include some of the residential area there going to the site. The trip modelling doesn't necessarily say if you live within half a mile, you're going to walk and cycle there. It will just say this is where people in the general direction come from. So the trips are just on the network there. So there would be some trips from the local residential area around Sergeant's Way. In terms of the severity issue on Sergeant's Way, I'm a completely different section from West Sussex, from the people who put in the scheme and monitoring it. What their allowance of trips through it, or it becoming an issue, I don't know. I don't have that information. I'm just assessing this planning application.
Sure.
And the policies in front of me.
No, I just wanted to understand. I don't mean it negatively, but the integrity of the data.
Yeah.
And I believe, Councillor Brooks, this is an ongoing discussion about the original initial challenge, and this is going to exacerbate it. So thank you for clarifying that, and I'm hoping this has put Sergeant's Way on the map, and further conversation can be had about that individual issue as a consequence of it. Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. A lot has been said this evening, and I share some of the concerns that have been expressed by members of the public. However, as the officers have explained, we have to deal with it as a planning application only, and what actually meets the policy requirements in our plan and in the MPPF. I'd just like to ask the officers, is there any scope to get those highway access improvements? I share the concerns raised by Councillor Fletcher. Access to the site is critical, not just for the motorists, but for pedestrians and cyclists. And I do think there is some scope to improve those things. So I would be minded to support the suggestion from Councillor Fletcher that we delegate this application for approval, subject to looking at how those things could be improved. But I do have those concerns that have been expressed that are outside, unfortunately, the planning process. And we have to deal with this as a planning application this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Clearly, it's a decision that members are entitled to make in terms of whether or not you wish further changes to be made to the application. Obviously, officers have been pressing the applicant to provide further changes, particularly with regard to walking and cycling. But obviously, if members feel that's critical to the acceptability of the scheme, it's within your remit to make that your decision tonight, and we would then have further discussions with the applicant. Thank you.
I'd like that to be a proposal if possible, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Vickers asked, as I thought I'd asked, but perhaps didn't earlier. I think we'd appreciate a comment from the West Sussex officer on that.
I'll start by saying, yes, they probably could do more. I'm not disagreeing with that, especially with all the guidance available. That being said, it's acceptable with what they're providing. When the scheme first came in, there was no cycle access. That was raised in the initial consultation request. Cycling slips from the shared use route were provided, enabling cyclists to cycle within the internal network of the development to reach whichever retail unit they were providing. It's a low speed environment, so cyclists could cycle on the carriageway within the internal network. As they're coming out, can rejoin the shared use facility. Yes, there is another crossing created by the access of the cycle routes. Whatever you do, there is going to be another access there for people going north-south. Could another route be punched into the north? Theoretically, yes, but there is an access at the roundabout. So is another one necessary to make the development acceptable in highways terms? No, because there is one provided within a similar distance to anyone coming from the north. So yeah, I mean, in summary, yes, they could do more, but they've done just about enough.
Thank you. That was a useful response. I think what I'd say, to put that in context from our point of view as a local planning authority, is that our policy, which is a planning policy, 6.10, actually requires applicants to actively improve existing and create new pedestrian and cycle connections. And that's not within the applicant's red line, that's to and within the whole Broadbridge Heath quadrant. And that's what's missing. And that's hence the reason why, although we know that West Sussex agreed that that was not required from a highways perspective necessarily, I think it's required from our own policy perspective. I would quibble with the actual design with those cycle slips, though. I think if it was assessed with the active travel guidance against standing advice against LTM 120, I think it would be found to be less than adequate. So I think it's good to hear from you that you think that that's possible. And I think it's not, if we were doing it, it's not just because of in order to make the application acceptable from the lowest bar from a highways point of view, but to make it acceptable from our local planning policy point of view.
Thanks, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Franklin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I would like to add support to the possibility that we have here to do better than the lowest sort of common denominator when it comes to active or travel other than in a car. I have just on the word cyclist, I have a bit of a problem with the word cyclist. I think they're just people who happen to be on a bicycle on that particular journey. They may at other times walk, or they may at other times drive. You know, cyclists are not a separate sort of part of our society. And I'd like to think that in 10 or 20 years' time, and that's how we have to think about some of these things, that there will be more people who might choose to walk or cycle than drive to such places. And if we don't put work in now to do more than the bare minimum, I think that future generations and our children will look back and think, what were we doing? I cycle a lot. I cycle around the area we're talking about tonight. I cycle in cities all over. And if you cycle in London, I mean, they are so far ahead of us here. That you know, we are in the dark ages when it comes to provision of access for people who choose to ride a bicycle to get to shops or schools or other facilities. So I would really like to put as much support as it's possible for me to do in supporting the any motion to put a condition on this, that we derive the best possible active travel for the future and not today's current cyclists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions. Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Vickers raised something very interesting, and I didn't necessarily understand it, but that's, you know, part of the course. But it's around the 6.10, 610, which is the Horsham plan, Horsham district, and it's under planning. So for my benefit, could you just educate me that an application that then is put forward to committee for us to determine, should the application then be in full alignment with Horsham district planning plans? Are we able to accept a plan, an application that contravenes our own planning regs?
It's in the local plan that's advancing, but
Yeah.
there's no reason why we can't take that into consideration.
So if we have our own clause about planning and an application is submitted to us that contravenes that in the local plan, just to reiterate, Chairman, is that grounds for refusal, or is that grounds for delaying it? How does that resolve itself?
Thank you, councillor. The policy is in our current Horsham district planning framework, so it carries full weight in decision making. Obviously, when you're considering a planning application, there's a whole array of things to consider. The national planning policy framework, any highways policy or guidance. Officers have considered this policy, just to say it's not like we've forgotten it. It has been assessed against that policy as well as the highways advice, and obviously the officers' view is acceptable, but you know, members can choose to have a different view. That's the democratic process. And so if members feel that it doesn't meet that policy, then that's a decision you're entitled to make. Obviously you need to consider, well, why doesn't it meet it? Can it meet it? How would it meet it? Can I impose a condition that it would meet it? So I think the answer is not necessarily just go to a refusal. If there is a way in which the development could be acceptable, then that's what members should consider. And obviously councillors have considered whether you add a condition or whether you delegate approval subject to further resolution over those matters. Those are decisions that members could choose to make today. Thank you.
I'll just add to that, as we sort of move towards deciding what we're going to do, it's been jolly tough by the sound of it on officers in discussions with the county already. So we may need to think about how to do this so that we give them a little bit of, either we condition these things. You know, this is the contemplation. Just handing delegation may not be sufficient for our officers.
Can I just come back on that? You know, just a quick reply. Okay, so what, if I understand you correctly, collective view, that means that potentially we need to have a discussion about where the Horsham plan sits in regards to this application or vice versa.
Not really. I mean, the thing is, remember, we have a local plan which currently carries full weight. We have an advancing plan which has been this area has been introduced and modified, and we need to consider our forward plan as well as the current plan, I would suggest. Okay. I'll come to you next, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for the West Sussex County Council officer. Just concerned about the validity of the numbers we're using. I note it says the traffic surveys were undertaken in November 2021, which, if you remember, is a time of COVID. And and according to the report, have been grouped to a 2024 opening year using some sort of a package called Tempro. Does that take into account probably the reduced numbers during 2021?
This is a standard approach to dealing with COVID years, that they growth it back to where it would be prior to COVID.
I understand that, but at that time, people were not coming out to go shopping. There was more deliveries to home. I just want to know that has been taken into account.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going back from my former response. I can confirm there weren't any COVID restrictions at the time that the traffic counts were undertaken.
So doesn't mean to say that there wasn't an impact from COVID and the road usage was low at that time. I've got a question about the validity of the figures we're using, and I do not have confidence in them. And I would like further traffic surveys to be undertaken so we know what we're talking about and we've got confidence with them.
I think the difficulty is it's difficult to justify that if there were no COVID restrictions in the time. I think it's just an opinion that perhaps it impacted it. I think it's ultimately, if it wasn't in place at the time, and it was carried out in accordance with the relevant guidance that and county are happy with that as the highway authority, it's difficult to see how that would justify the need for an additional traffic survey.
Well, with all due respect, I disagree with that opinion. I remember not going to the shops during the whole of 2021, even though I do not like shopping at the best of times. So I will vote against this application because I do not have confidence in the figures being used at the present time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Livingston. Councillor Frank.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of things have been said today, which I agree with, and I feel the emotion and understand the context. I really want to support this. I think it's a potentially really good proposal, but I want to quote actually Councillor Minto a little bit here, and looking back to what Councillor Franklin said, just about thinking about people that cycle. And I just think I want this to work. I want this to be a good proposal. I think there's quite a low bar. It seems a really low bar to put together this plan here. I think it's important to get it right first time. Get it right. Just think about the local people, think about the business, think about the future here. Get it right first time. And also, the people that cycle might also include an awful lot of companies that deliver food on cycles these days. That's a whole new thing which will come out. And so we need to protect the workers, need to protect the customers, all the local people here. So I think there's a general, I feel, general mood in the room to potentially just ask there to be a second thought on this and ask the people that have put this forward to really think, put a little bit more quality, a little bit of money into this to make the arrangements better first time round.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Horsham.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to empathise with the people that objected to this scheme and first of all, obviously the things to speak, asking questions from the public gallery. This is a public meeting in public. It's not a public meeting, so unfortunately we can't sort of engage with you too much. Hopefully we share a lot of your concerns, and I apologise if that wasn't made crystal clear at the beginning of the meeting. I think Councillor Fletcher put some excellent points across. I think if Councillor Fletcher would like to put them through as an amendment to delegate the authority subject to I think policy 610 is enforceable. I think that we can ask for more. I think we've got a written policy that's enforceable, and I think we have every right to do that. But I think delegating it for approval subject to the tightening of some of those policies would be the way forward. The two restaurants, the other applicant that had concern about the restaurants, I'm sure all of us councillors around the table have absolute empathy and share those concerns. But we actually don't know what those restaurants are. We can't. The principle of planning is it's a restaurant. If it applies for a licensing for alcohol, that will go to the licensing team. It'll go to the environmental health team. There'll be other departments that will look into that in more detail. From a planning point of view, I feel my hands are tied. There is nothing I can do. I'm finding no reason to turn this applicant down. I'm surprised the debate has actually gone on quite as long as it has when we don't have any grounds to turn this down. We just share the same concerns that you have as members of the public, and obviously want to do everything we can to support you. And thank you for raising them. Sergeant Way, the traffic modelling frustrates the hell out of me. You heard the highways officer say that roads have to become severe, gridlock for 20 minutes. I mean, for a C road to be classed as severe, it's ridiculous. 100 cars a minute or something, more than one up. It is absolutely for the developer to need to spend more money upgrading the existing road network. If they don't have to, they're not going to do it. And if the highways modelling don't do that, so again, we're not the highways authority. We have to take professional advice that we get. And our hands are tied without objection on highway grounds. Again, we can't object. So as there'll be people in this room, councillors around the that may want to object to this, but just haven't got the grounds to, unfortunately. So I hope that answers some of the theories from the public. I have my concerns. I'd be happy to listen to Councillor Fletcher's amendments if she wants to go through them again after everyone's perhaps had a chance to speak. But thank you for your time, everyone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horsham. Yes, it is everybody's right to speak, which is why these things go on as they do. I think we ought to be now thinking of really sort of getting our heads around how we're going to close this off. One would like to think, and I say this out loud and I probably shouldn't, but one would like to think that if we did refuse it, or whether there are grounds to, the county council wouldn't appeal against the district council and waste lots of our public money. However, that's not probably on the table. Let's move this forward now. If there is a proposition, then let's hear it. Let's finesse it.
In order to improve compliance with policy 610, I propose that we add a condition to require safeguarding of land for a potential future route through to the Broadbridge Heath Retail Park. And for clarity, but not for the wording in the condition, it looks to me like the right place for that to go is currently from adjacent, close to the drive-through coffee shop, across to the entrance road in the Broadbridge Heath Retail Park, probably more or less at where the footpath ends. And that's lines up with a pedestrian, a place a pedestrian can get across on the other side. So that's the first part that I'd suggest. And the second part I'd like to propose for an amendment is that we delegate this with a view to approval, subject to consultation with the local members and the usual officers and so on, in order to further investigate and make any necessary changes. And I'll leave the officers to come up with the nice, neat wording for that. So the cycle and pedestrian access from between the underpass and the site, north of the proposed mini roundabout.
And we're happy that that gives the officers the steel they need.
That's my proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. I would like to explore going a bit further. I think, and I haven't read it unfortunately, but I think the policy 610 referred to the access for people riding bicycles to be wider than just the immediate area and throughout the adjoining areas where people might want to use that mode of transport to get to the new development. So can we in some way include a requirement to explore that as far as possible? And there was a reference to linking up with existing cycleways in Horsham. I've yet to see what I would classify as an existing cycleway in Horsham, but I would like to be delighted if they could be developed as part of this development.
Thank you very much. This is the point, isn't it? We're dealing with the authority that looks after our cycle routes and our highways and our walkways and the rest of it. So this is an opportunity for us to make sure it's done properly, because the people with the interest here are the people who are in charge of these things. So let's, I'm not saying we need to twist arms, but let's make sure what we put forward provides our officers with the steel they need to get what we expect.
Could I suggest that we could probably cover that by putting in the word including? So including the access between the underpass and the site, rather than just saying the access, and say including.
Minto.
It appears we're picking bits out of 610. Surely we should be saying a full adherence to 610. Just full adherence to 610, rather than cherry pick bits. That's it. That's our plan. That's our ambition. Full adherence to 610.
Thank you. That is the steel we're looking for. We have a clause going for in the new local plan. Let's make sure that it's lived up to by the good people who are in charge of this stuff.
Thank you. It's clear, obviously, members don't consider the development complies with 610. But I think we do need to give the developers some direction in terms, because obviously from an officer's point of view, we have a report before you that says we consider it complies with it. Members have come to a view that it doesn't, which you're entitled to make, but we do need to give some direction within that period of delegation as to, well, how do you think it needs to comply with it? If I read, Councillor Fletcher, if I read the wording, try and bear with me because I've added extra words in. If I read what I've put, and you can confirm whether you feel that reflects where we are. So delegate with a view to approval, subject to consultation with local members, to improve cycle and pedestrian access, including from the subway into the site via the roundabout and Broadbridge Way, in order to comply with policy 6.10. Obviously that's very broad brush.
I think rather than say access to the site, it should say access between the subway and the site, because it's in both directions. And I don't think we needed the bits about the roundabouts. I think that confused it.
Okay.
Yeah. My brain's too, I can come and peer over your shoulder. at your
Can
words if that helps.
can I propose we take 5 minutes and the 2 or 3 heads who feel they can work this out with the officers do that, and we will we'll reconvene in 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I think that would be really helpful. It's not also. We,
Yeah, that chair.
between the sites and what is it?
And the subway.
What they do.
Well. This.
Okay. Format is what it is here. It's not appropriate under the system for the public to engage with the members. And I'm sorry, you have an opportunity to speak. You were given that opportunity, and that is where it ends. And I'm not permitted to have it any other way. So, have we reached a motion?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've discussed this with Councillor Fletcher, and I've written down Councillor Fletcher's motion here, so if I can just read it for committee. So the motion is to delegate with a view to approval, subject to consultation with local members. And if we can discuss whether you wish to add others to that, to the chairman, okay.
Chairman and Kevin.
Okay, okay. Okay, let me.
And that's Kevin.
Yep. So delegate with a view to approval, subject to consultation with local members, the chairman and the cabinet member for planning, to improve cycle and pedestrian access, including between the underpass and the site, in order to comply with policy 6.10. And also part of the motion is to add a condition to safeguard a future pedestrian link to the north. Thank you. Chair, do we have a proposer and a seconder for that?
If Ruth was the proposer and Councillor Vickers is the seconder. So we'll move to a vote. All those in favour?
Fifteen for.
15 for, those against?
I'm against.
And any abstentions?
One abstention.
Thank you, that is carried. Thank you for those people in attendance. Councillor Minto.
May I just ask a question and make a point? There's been quite a few planning meetings that I've witnessed more recently that the public have wanted to talk, and through no fault of their own probably didn't realise that they couldn't talk, or maybe the information about the process and the format hasn't necessarily cascaded through. So could we just take a point away to check what is communicated to members of the public when they're accepted to speak, when they arrive, and then maybe obviously in the chairman's opening, make it really, really clear, because I think it is unfortunate that people want to speak but can't, and we know why they can't. And also to encourage them to reach out to their local member in advance if they want to discuss any concerns about something that impacts on them in a particular ward. I think that might help moving forward, and hope you don't mind me recommending that.
No, that's fine, that's noted. We'll take that on board, we'll see what we think.
Also to contact the planning case officer. The case officer's just confirmed that he hadn't had any calls about it. So I think obviously at Horsham, unlike some councils, planning officers will actually talk to the public. You know, reach out if there are any questions.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It just makes an all-round better experience for all, I'd suggest.
Understood, noted, thank you. Right, moving on. DC item 7, DC 23-1909, the Owl Dorking Road, Kingsfold.
Good evening. So members should note that since this report was published, an additional 9 objections have been received, which mainly relate to highway safety concerns. So this application was deferred from the 2nd of July Planning North Committee in order for the Highways Authority to address questions raised by the committee. The application is for a pair of semi-detached houses with access from Marches Road. The houses are proposed to be constructed on part of the car park of the Owl Public House, which you can see here. This slide shows the location of the public house on the corner of Dorking Road and Marches Road in Kingsfold. So this photo shows taken from Google Street View and shows the existing access to the pub from Marches Road, and this is the access to be used for the new houses, and you can see the pub there. So this is the other side from Dorking Road. Most of the parking here is to be retained with the new access for the pub car park. The new access is approximately where the pub sign is shown in this photo. So here we see the existing layouts. The pub is on the corner of two roads and benefits from a large car parking area. And here we see the proposed location of the site with the pair of semi-detached properties in place in the southwest corner. The scheme includes relocating the access to the car park from Dorking Road, the A24 further north, as shown here. And the relocation of the vehicle entrance onto the A24 raised significant concerns with councillors in relation to highway safety at the July committee. So at the July committee, members posed a number of queries to be addressed by Highways and the application was deferred. So here was the questions raised here. The committee report has gone into detail addressing each of these concerns with additional comments from the Highways team. This takes into account additional transport technical statements submitted by the applicants in response to the committee and the concerns raised. The Highways teams has also taken into account the separate traffic surveys undertaken by the parish and a residents group. County Highways maintained that the proposed access meets the relevant highway guidelines under the Manual for Streets and that the access would allow safe and sufficient access and visibility for vehicles. As such, it's felt that the queries from the July committee regarding highway safeties have been sufficiently addressed and approval is recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. We have four speakers, 2 minutes each, starting with Andrew Crombie, please.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Andrew Crombie from the Kingsfold Residents Association, later referred to as the KRA. The proposal to move the entrance exit for the Owl north is dangerous for southbound traffic on the A24 due to sight lines. Indeed, when the KRA made inquiries about having a pedestrian crossing in that position, they were told it was too dangerous. In addition, the last planning application for this site was agreed subject to the A24 exit being closed. If a southbound vehicle wishes to turn into the new entrance, it has to wait to cross the constant northbound traffic. During that waiting time, the third vehicle to come around the bend will find the road blocked just around the bend, and if that vehicle is an HGV or a bus, the second car waiting is likely to be crushed or pushed into oncoming traffic. This result could be fatal. The proposal was tried to justify the sight lines for the crossover by using the Manual for Streets, a document which does not define a street or a road. Please picture a street lined with street lights, 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, paved on both sides, lined with houses and or shops, only used for HGVs for deliveries. Kingsfold does not have any of these. The Manual for Streets is clearly wrong for this major A road. The correct manual is for roads and bridges, in which stopping distances need to be much greater, and this crossover cannot fulfil the requirements due to the bends in the road close to the pub. You'll notice I've not mentioned the houses in the application, as it is only the A24 safety that seriously concerns me. I am not a NIMBY. I only have genuine concerns for safety, as I did when I was once in your position.
Thank you. That's your time.
Council.
That's time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now, Aidan Metcalf, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our collective objection to this application is based on one element of that application, and that is the proposed entrance and exit to the public house onto the A24. This presents clearly as a major safety risks to residents and road users. I live in Foxwood Barn, directly opposite the Owl, behind the fir trees. The previous owners had applied to get an opening from the property onto the A24, and this was rejected at the time on the merits of that application. This was rejected for safety reasons. That was the correct decision at the time. We understand that the planning officers must apply the rules as they are written. The merits of this particular application totally depend on the definition of this stretch of road being a residential street. These are the facts. The traffic survey referenced in the application confirms the traffic numbers. 15,000 vehicles will use this short stretch of road every day on average. 1,500 of those vehicles may be HGVs. The average speed for the traffic is calculated at 38.4 miles per hour. That allows for traffic north and south. The guidance manual for streets sets a maximum speed of 60 kilometers per hour, which is actually 37.3 miles per hour. We're obviously in excess of that speed limit. Only 2 miles north of the Kingsfold area, the A24 is a 70 miles per hour dual carriageway. This cannot constitute a residential street according to both the formal guidance and by this use of the smallest bit of common sense. Even if this definition was considered to be something of a grey area and subject to some interpretation, surely the first priority must be to the safety of the residents and the road users. I respectfully request the council members reject this application.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. Richard Collins, please.
Good evening. I'm Richard Collins, Chair of the KRA. As some of the other members have touched upon, this objection is based solely on the road safety. And I'm sure you've all used the A24 and driven past the Owl pub. The junction there is a dangerous junction as it stands now. So I think you can see our concerns. We as a community of Kingsfold commissioned our own road survey at a cost of £900, which demonstrated there were circa 15,000 vehicles a day, with 10% being HGVs. I'm sure this amount of vehicles do not travel up and down every residential street daily where you all live. Therefore, by the definition, the A24 is classed as a main road, providing large-scale transport links between areas. So how is it classed as a residential street on this application? The most recent application, which was granted for premises to be built in the Owl car park, stipulated that no vehicles will exit out onto the A24. Yet some 10 years later, with significant more traffic, it would seem now it's okay. Due to the above points, we met with Punch Brewer, Director of Development, to discuss the entrance and exit of the proposed pub. They could see our concerns. They could see the dangers of the road when they came to the site to meet us, and they have gone away to look at options of the entrance exit rather than going onto the A24. So for the reasons above, I urge you to reject the planning application on safety grounds. What I and the rest of Kingsfold do not want is a "we told you so" moment when a serious accident happens. We want to protect the people of Kingsfold and the road users alike. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Richard. And lastly, Jeremy Heppel, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I represent Punch Pubs. As you've heard from the speakers just now, my client has reached out to local residents and discussed the access arrangements with them. And the obviously preferred local option of an access from Marches Road. my client perceives two problems with that. First, it cuts through the beer garden, which has recently been upgraded, and takes away most of that, which is clearly not his preference. And it would also leave the pub without an access off the main road, which commercially is not advantageous. So my client has opted not to pursue this option further, but instead to focus on ensuring that the proposed new access is indeed safe. As you've heard, our transport consultants have reviewed in detail the concerns raised by members of the previous committee and have submitted additional evidence, and the county surveyor has confirmed that evidence, and they continue to recommend permission for the scheme. We've circulated a briefing note to members summarising that. The 7-day speed survey undertaken by my client was done under correct conditions, and indeed the parish speed survey recently undertaken has now corroborated those speeds that were found, and therefore visibility displays of 62 and 63 metres can be achieved, along with a forward visibility display for drivers moving south on the main road of 59 metres. So all requirements can be met. And lastly, accident data in the area shows only one serious accident, and that was actually on Marches Road, not Dorking Road. And so the absence of a cluster of serious incidents indicates no clear evidence of a safety issue. So I would ask members to grant approval for the scheme, which is a sustainably located brownfield site where the principle of housing should, in our view, be acceptable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jeremy. Right. Do you want to move on, or should we go to the?
Just wonder whether you would mind commenting on those points, given that they're all highways related, if you mind.
Just to clarify, the recorded speeds are not on average, they're an 85th percentile speed. So 15% would be a bit above rather than 50, as alluded to with a normal average. Having looked at the site, undertaken a site visit myself today, a colleague originally assessed the application. I would agree with him that the site would fall under the manual for streets parameters rather than the design manual for roads and bridges, by virtue of the footway bus stop. As I visited the site, there was some pedestrian activity as well, whereas with the design manual for road and bridges, I wouldn't expect any of those things to be present. So that being said, I would agree with the highway officer who dealt with the application and provided the response that manual for streets and the visibility displays are appropriate.
Who'd like to go first? Oh, yes, that's nice. I was looking at Councillor Greenwood.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this application was deferred because of concerns due to road safety issue. And having read the report and listened carefully, I have to say honestly that I haven't really heard anything that's particularly set my mind at ease in this application. I've seen the recent traffic survey done by the Parish Council, which continues to note the high volume of traffic and also the number of vehicles speeding down the A24. I've been sent pictures of recent signage that's gone up outside the pub warning of the dangerous bend. So clearly, you know, the danger of that road has been acknowledged. If there's a bus stop there, and even if that bus stop was moved, the fact that the bus stop is on that stretch of road can lead to a build-up of traffic behind the bus, therefore limiting visibility down that road. And as has been mentioned, any vehicle coming from the north turning right into the pub car park has to wait for clear access from the vehicles coming north. So traffic will build up behind that vehicle, and then the visibility coming around the bend gets minimal, and it just strikes me as particularly dangerous. And as far as I can see, the only reason that access to the pub hasn't been put off Marches Road is because the pub has already developed a beer garden. And I understand we can't compare this application to something we would prefer to have, but that doesn't strike me as a good enough reason to endanger public safety and put access to the pub where potentially an accident could happen. And I think if we were to accept this, I would hope that as a bare minimum we could have some sort of signage from the bends on each end of the A24 to say, so slow down, there is an access point coming. I'm not sure that would be sufficient because it's completely reliant on people actually slowing down. I mean, I will try and remain open-minded and listen to the thoughts of my fellow members. But cards on the table at this moment, it doesn't strike me as a good idea to have an access point to the pub off the A24. And without wishing to sound alarmist, the consequences of this decision could be fatal. So that's where I'm sitting at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Greenwood. Sorry, just I understand that Councillor Utown's not here, but she has asked Councillor Vickers, is that correct, to say something on her behalf?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, she's very sorry she can't be here this evening. Very briefly, she had the same concerns that Councillor Greenwood had when the application was deferred for further consultation. She asked me to ask the officers whether West Sussex County Council did take any notice of the residents and the parish council's transport assessment when coming to their final conclusion that this is acceptable and safe and a safe access. It does surprise me as somebody who has tried to turn right out of that access before they close that exit off, just how difficult it was to see around that bend. I share those concerns that have been expressed about highway safety, but as we have the officer from West Sussex County Council here, and thank you for coming, I just want you to clarify that you have taken account of the resident survey and the parish council's transport assessment.
Yeah, so I can confirm the officer who assessed the application has seen those documents, surveys, and provided comments back that have been incorporated into the officer's report.
It is in the report. I just wanted it clarified for those that are here. That was the only matter still outstanding from the previous discussion on this application. So we're only here tonight, am I right, to discuss whether the access is now acceptable? Just confirm that.
Yeah, Councillor Vickers, obviously that was the only reason for deferral, so that really should be the focus of members' considerations tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this has devolved down to a decision around road safety. Okay, so, and we're here to make a judgment on that, and at the end of the process we'll make a vote whether to approve or reject. So I think it would be helpful if an officer could tell us categorically, is this application road safe or not? I'd like to have, can I have a black or white answer? Is this categorically a safe application from road safety, or are there any grey areas? Thank you.
The applicant provided drawings to show that a safe access can be provided.
I think, Councillor, we can't obviously, you know, we can't look into the future. We can only consider the application based on the guidance and policies we have in planning terms. Obviously, as our higher officer here has explained, that has been assessed on that basis, and therefore it complies with the guidance in terms of what a safe access is. I think we can't do any more than that in terms of assessing a planning application. So I'm not sure what your question is.
If I wasn't clear, if this is devolved down now to a debate about road safety, and we have to make a decision based on road safety, it's a black or white decision. It's either safe or it isn't safe. So from my point of view, for me to be able to make a decision on where I'm going to vote on this, and I am open-minded, I just need to understand for myself, is this yes or no, black or white, a road safety safe application or not? And when someone says to me, well, it can be made safe, it doesn't indicate to me, based on other experiences we might have seen tonight earlier, that people will categorically make it safe. It can be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So I'm just asking the question. Is it safe or not?
Okay, thank you, councillor. I'll try and answer the question. So if a planning application is granted, we approve the plans before us, which will include ensuring that the access is delivered in accordance with requirements that we consider make it a safe access. So the planning, if a planning application is granted, there are means in which we can ensure that the development is built in accordance with approved plans. And obviously, the officer's view is those approved plans do provide for a safe access in accordance with national guidance and policy.
Councillor Livingston.
Okay, thank you, Chair. What I'd like to ask is, why does West Sussex County Council not use their own local design guide, which is supplementary guidance for residential development proposals, which I accessed from their website today? And it states some interesting points there. It talks about clause 1.2, the remit of the document, which refers back to the MFS, primarily relates to lightly trafficked residential streets. So that obviously doesn't, to me, comply. But it also states in clause 4.1, MFS recommends minimum visibility requirements for lightly trafficked streets with 85 percentile speeds that do not exceed 37 miles per hour. Consequently, West Sussex County Council applied the visibility criteria for residential streets within the county where speeds are below this threshold. We have the 85 percentile speed of 38.6, I think it was, in one direction. So that contradicts their own standard. So why are they using MFS when their own guidance document states they will not use it? That's my question to the officer, please.
Yes, so between 37 miles per hour and 40 miles per hour between the manual for streets and DMRB parameters, it is a judgment call. And as I said at the beginning, due to the virtue of footways, bus stops, some pedestrian activity, residential development, the officer's judgment who assessed the case, and I would agree with him, having visited the site, would be for manual for streets.
If that was the case, I would expect them to be referencing their own design guidance document. It's not been referenced by West Sussex County Council Highways or the HDC officers. I would expect them to be referring to their own guidance document before coming to that decision.
Thank you, Councillor Livingston. Councillor Minto.
Thank you, Chair. So look, I appreciate all the effort that's gone in from everyone on this, councillors, officers, West Sussex County Council, and I note that the head of development said that we can't look into the future, but for me on this one, it's also about looking into the past. And I think sometimes lived experience, and I think what we're hearing from a lot of residents and heard from a lot of residents is lived experience, and all the rule books and all the methodologies and everything like that are there, I think, for guidance and to protect us. But in some circumstances, some situations, I think history of comes into play. I've grown up in Horsham, and that road has taken the lives of a number of people when I was much younger. I went to my nan's funeral along that road and went past a car that was on its roof because it had lost control and spun and gone to its head. That is not a residential street, in my honest opinion. And I take on board everything everyone is saying about how it meets the criteria. I just cannot put my name to an approval on this one. Unfortunately, it's something I just couldn't possibly do because I am so generally concerned that it's an accident waiting to happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Minto.
Thank you, Councillor Minto. I think obviously members can take into account that any history associated with the site, but it can't be anecdotal history. Obviously, it needs to be evidence, and members need to make decisions on the basis of evidence. Obviously, if members consider this application is unacceptable, you would have to substantiate that based on relevant highway guidance and policy. So just be mindful of that in your discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I completely concur with the residents on the street issue, and I suspect part of the criteria for that is the bus stop, if I'm not mistaken. And one could also question wisdom of having a bus stop on that bend as well. However, maybe there are other reasons. But looking back, there is a reason why currently the pub doesn't pile out onto the A24. There was somebody sat down and thought about that once upon a time and went, oh, that would be a silly thing. Let's do it through the back. And I question, with the increase in traffic that there is these days, as to why that's now okay. It's the first thing. So I tested it myself. I went down there on Sunday, and I was trying not to be predetermined. I realise I am subjective in this, but I wanted to be an informed subjective. And so I did try and look at it and see how I would do it myself. And I use that junction a lot. And it's always taking your life in your hands on that junction. And so to increase traffic, particularly after being in the pub, let's not draw any conclusions with that, sorry. I think would be a huge mistake. The sight lines from there are really, really poor when you exit onto the main road. And as the traffic officer just said, it is a judgment call. And I have a judgment. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Trott. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for coming along from West Sussex today. It's really useful to have somebody here. I'm wondering about the previous applications that were refused on the grounds of openings there or that far up the road being dangerous, and whether what has changed in the meantime, and also when the assessments that were done for those used the what's called the manual for streets, or whether a different assessment criteria was used. Do you know that at all?
I'll be perfectly honest, I picked this up in the last couple of days and don't know about the history of the site of the previous application. That being said, the access moves northwards, so the visibilities are improved over the existing access. I also know there's significant overgrown vegetation to the south of the site that, if the access was provided in its current place, would create a concern. So moving it northwards does improve it on the existing situation. But yeah, as I say, regarding previous applications on the site, I'm not aware of this because I've only picked it up. A colleague assessed it.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers.
I'm sorry.
Councillor Vickers, please.
Yes, Chairman, can I just ask a question of the officer, of the transport officer? Is it possible that the speed limit could be reduced here? I just wonder whether it's something that could be considered in order to slow the traffic down further. I know it said 85%, I was at 38-ish miles an hour, so 15% of people then obviously travel more than 40 miles an hour, which is quite a considerable number of cars actually when you think of the total volume going through that site. I just wonder if there's any possibility of a 30-mile-an-hour limit along that section, and with SID indicators maybe.
My first response was the application's assessed on what's proposed, and as my colleague in the formal response is, and I agree with him, the application is acceptable on its own merits at this moment in time. Regarding speed limit reductions, that would be undertaken by various other means, applying for a community highway scheme, things like that. Given the 85th percentile speeds, should speed limit reduction be acceptable, then maybe the requirement of measures, but that's getting ahead of ourselves and not dependent. The planning application isn't dependent on the speed limit being reduced.
But it is a possibility in the future.
It can be. it can be applied for, but I'm not the determining person to make that decision.
Thank you.
And also we have to be mindful that it can't really be a condition of the, you know, it's beyond this application for having that requirement. Sorry, yes, please. Councillor, sorry, can't read.
Thank you. To me, one of the main, if you like, issues here is the volume of traffic. Can you just clarify that traffic volumes are part of the criteria that have been used to arrive at the decision that's been made thus far?
So in the requirements, whether it's the MRB or manual for streets. Yes, the volume of traffic isn't a main consideration. It is the speed of vehicles, because obviously you need to be able to see the vehicle coming towards you for the movement rather than the pure number.
Okay, so there is a difference between 100 cars a day and 15,000 cars a day. So how is that built into the calculations? It's not, we're comparing apples and pears in that case.
It's based on speed rather than volume.
But that seems nonsensical for what we're looking at.
In theory, the risk of a collision is the same in terms of will you see a vehicle if if the visibility display isn't acceptable.
I think that's the answer. Councillor Fletcher.
This really seems to be much harder than it ought to be. We have here a road which is an important road functioning as a road with the movement function prioritised over the place function. And we have 15,000 vehicles going along there, 15% of which are going at above 38 point something miles an hour, which is quite a large number of vehicles, out of which to have the occasional mistake if we get the entrance wrong on this road. So we need to look at the guidance. Design manual for roads and bridges, it's true, it's designed basically for dual carriageways and motorways and things, rather than local roads like the A24. Manual for streets, the original one was designed for streets. Manual for streets 2, which is the applicable document here, is designed for the more main and busy streets. And it's true that it tries to encourage local authorities to treat these busy roads as streets, not as motorways. And quite frankly, I think if we were to put design manual for roads and bridges curves and sightlines and things on all the junctions around here, the net result of that would be to make the traffic go faster than it's going at already. The last thing we want is the traffic to go faster than it is already, because that would make any collision resulting with the entrance worse, but also affects the people on the buses, the people who've got houses that are backing on or fronting onto this road, and just people who want to live in the village of Kingsfold. So what about manual for streets 2? Well, manual for streets 2, when you look at it, this situation is right on the edge of the situations it's envisaging. And having looked at some detail to this and gone back to West Sussex about it, it's true that it's guidance, but the actual speeds, those 38 point something miles per hour, are above the 60 kilometres an hour limits manual for streets is talking about. And I know West Sussex have argued things about it, saying, well, in rural roads, 40 miles an hour applies rather than 60 kilometres an hour. But when you look into it, it's talking about country lanes. It's not talking about places where they've got 15,000 vehicles, some of which, 15% of which are going above 38 miles an hour, some of which will be going very much in excess of that. So I would argue that manual for streets 2, despite the what we've heard from West Sussex doesn't really apply convincingly to this road. Within it, it does say very clearly you need to take into account the context of the road. And the context of the road is that it is a major road that people are using for travelling long distance to get along as fast as they can. There are a number of people there, for example, the bus users. Rather than us try to say this is something that should be a design manual for roads and bridges design, it seems to me the obvious thing we should be doing is actually making the road a better road for the street aspects of it that West Sussex are keen to encourage. I imagine the pub would like it to be more like a street and less like a road, because that will help their trade. And the way to do that would be to reduce the speed to 30 miles an hour. Previously, when there were other applications, West Sussex had a speed limit policy that didn't allow the speed limit to be dropped at 30 miles an hour on this sort of road. But now that is within the new West Sussex speed limit policy, though it notes that you need to look at possible additional measures such as road markings, SIDs and further signage, which I don't think anybody here is going to object to. So a lower speed limit would bring it clearly within the remit of Manual for Streets 2 that it's currently actually sitting outside of. And I think it would have all sorts of knock-on effects of benefit for residents, customers, bus travellers and so on. Which is why I asked our officers to ask West Sussex whether they would support a 30 miles an hour speed limit, whether they would commit to working with the applicant with a view to bringing in a new 30 miles an hour speed limit. Unfortunately, I haven't had a response. I don't accept that, oh, somebody can apply for this as part of a community highways scheme is an answer, because we all know there are very few of those get through, and there would be an extremely long delay even if it were to happen before it happened. So to me, the way forward in this seems to be, if West Sussex is prepared to support it, is for us to approve the application, but asking the West Sussex and the applicant to work together with a view to bringing in a new 30 mile an hour speed limit. I don't think we can require the 30 mile an hour speed limit, but if we have West Sussex's support for that, I can't see any reason why a 30 mile an hour speed limit is not going to be achievable in this situation. So my question to our colleague from West Sussex is West Sussex able to support a 30 mile an hour speed limit here? And would West Sussex be able to commit to work with the applicant with a view to bringing in a new 30 mile an hour speed limit here?
So as I mentioned before, the development's been found, well, our advice is the development's acceptable as it is. It's not within my remit to say, yes, 30 mile an hour is acceptable to be explored. That would be another separate department.
And as a consequence, I think it would be unreasonable for us to put it in some sort of condition on the applicant, because it relies on them striking a deal with something that, quite frankly, is way beyond all of us.
Thank you, Chairman. But yeah, I think that's the difficulty with that suggestion, is obviously generally when you add a condition, it needs to be within the site itself and within the control of the applicant. So you couldn't add a condition on that is reliant on a third party to get delivered. So I think that would be the difficulty here. And obviously we don't have any anything from counties to say they would support something. So effectively we could be granting a permission that could never be implemented and the applicant has no right of appeal. So I think it's, without further input from the relevant person at county, it's difficult to comment further, but I would be concerned about just adding that as a requirement here today. Thank you.
I mean, I'd like to comment, I'm disappointed that we asked for a response from county about this in advance of this meeting, so that we would be in a position to make an arrangement of this sort. It seems I'm reluctant to go ahead and just let this pass as it stands. I do challenge the validity of the Manual for Streets guidance. It's at the very best interpretation, right on the limits of that guidance. And I'm wondering whether, don't want to defer it again, but do we defer it again until West Sussex, to ask West Sussex this question again to get an answer? Do we put an informative on to ask the applicant to work with West Sussex? I don't think that requires anybody to do anything, so there's a risk nothing will happen. What is the way forward? Because I think it's clear the strength of feeling here. It's clear that there is a risk that the application could be turned down if against the Highways advice, which is problematic in itself. So is there a way that we can actually make sure we properly explore this option?
I think there's two things I'd just like to say, councillors, is when you're considering mitigation, you have to consider, is it required to make the development acceptable? So I think the question therefore is a 30-mile-an-hour required to make the development acceptable? Obviously, we've heard about existing speed limits. So is the development of 2 houses required to 30-mile-an-hour required to make this development acceptable? That's the one thing. But the second thing is we have already deferred this once. Members are in receipt of the responses to that for you to consider. You may agree with them or not. Obviously, that's your judgment to make. And I would encourage you just to make a decision based on the information before you today and the circumstances, the site circumstances as exist at present. Thank you.
Councillor Frank.
Thank you, Chair. So where I am on this is with Councillor Greenwood, Councillor Minto and Councillor Trott, really, that I would feel uncomfortable being asked to make a judgment this is safe. But it brings me on to the discussion about conditions. And if I read the title of the application, it says erection of two semi-detached dwellings with access from Marches Road, associated parking and landscaping on land adjacent to public house, including creation of new vehicular access to the public house, reconfiguration, delivery bay, beer garden, and car park or public house. So my question, which might be naive, is can a condition be, it doesn't state in the title where that vehicle access is to be placed. I think we mentioned that conditions are best defined when they're within the boundaries, if you like, or the control of the applicant, the development itself. So my naive question is, can we place a condition on this to approve it, but that the vehicular access has to be specified as being from Marches Road rather than from the A24?
So you have to determine the application based on the application as submitted. And that's not just the description of development, it's all the plans that were submitted because it's a full planning application. So when it's a full planning application, you are considering all matters. And therefore the layout is as shown on this plan here, and that is what is being sought. So we can't fundamentally change the scheme by a condition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's pretty clear. Councillor Trott. Okay. Yes, please do.
I'm probably going to make myself very unpopular, but at the beginning of the report at 1.2, there were 6 questions that came from this committee when it was last considering this application to the county council. We've had a response on those questions. We don't like those responses, but the West Sussex County Council are the highway authority, who are the responsible body and the body that has the knowledge about highway matters. So having asked the county council for their response, we've had that. Maybe we should have asked different questions, but we can't keep sort of biting at this until we get the answer we want. We've asked the county council for their answers. They've given it to us. I think we have to determine this application based on those answers that we've now received. Thank you.
Councillor Greenwood.
Sorry, just in response to that, I understand that West Sussex is obviously a statutory body and we have to take their recommendations into account. However, this is the decision-making body and their recommendation is advisory. So I can see the answers to the questions. I stand with Councillor Fletcher that I'm not satisfied that a manual for streets question has actually been answered satisfactorily. And we still have that decision-making power regardless of the answers. It's advice. So I still question the manual for streets point.
Thank you. Look, I think we're kind of there for either somebody to propose the motion as is, or for somebody else to propose an alternative motion.
Sorry, Chair, just one quick comment. Councillor Minto said that, I think he was almost implied that if someone had an accident after we granted this, his conscience wouldn't forgive himself. Maybe I'm paraphrasing what he said. I don't feel like that. I feel that the statutory body, the West Sussex County Council, the professionals have made a judgment. We've asked the professionals, we've quizzed them, they've come back to us, they've given us their decision. So it's not us, we're not deciding whether it's safe. The professional advice that we have from the Highways Authority has deemed it as safe. So whichever way I choose to vote on this, my conscience is clear. If someone has an accident, I'm voting on the information that I'm given by the professionals that are presenting it to me. I've challenged it, I've queried it. I don't like the answers that have come back, I'll be honest, but there we are. I've been on this committee 10 years. I think we've overruled the Highways Authority a handful of times. Perhaps I can ask this question of the officer: how many times we've lost that on appeal? How many times when we have gone against the Highways Authority and they've appealed have we been successful? My personal opinion is we've lost on several occasions and been awarded costs, and the application has gone through anyway. But that is a question for the officer. If we were to turn this down, what does the officer think the likelihood of the applicant applying on appeal and winning is? Thank you.
Chair, just before Councillor Livingston takes a question, I'd like to just guard the committee members against thinking about these things in terms of absolutes. That is not the test that you're required to apply here. There is no such thing as an absolutely safe road, and neither are you required to find that. It is a relative concept, and that's why we have the highways officers' advice to committee. I get the feeling that any accident ever you'd feel would be weighing on your conscience, but I'm afraid to say that would happen probably anywhere, any road. It's a spectrum, and you're required to apply a different test to the absolute safety test, which is fantasy.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. I'd like to respond to that, is that our role as councillors is to represent the people that we represent. And at the same time, to operate within this committee, within the bounds of the function of this committee. And that is our judgment call. And where I'm on this is that I'm not satisfied that this application has given sufficient weight and thought to road safety. And that's my subjective personal view.
That's absolutely fine. That's a correct application of the test, and you're entitled to reach that. Of course you are, but I don't want to. I want to try and nip in the bud this talk about the sort of absolute safety, because when it comes to things like roads, we can't be thinking in terms of those tests.
Thank you. I think that's pretty clear. Councillor Livingston.
Thank you. Right. I understand about the absolute test, but what we've got to consider is that by having this entrance onto the A24 does increase risk. It increases the possibility of harm to drivers or occupants of vehicles. So risk is made up of the likelihood of an occurrence, plus the consequence. Now, is the likelihood going to increase by having that exit there? I think it, in my opinion, it does. And the consequence with high volumes of traffic at high, 15% over the 37-mile-an-hour recorded test. Now, that's going to obviously have a consequence where there could well be a fatality. So we're increasing risk, we're increasing the likelihood of harm. I think that's the test we should be applying. Thank you.
We're going around in circles or in danger of. Councillor Fletcher, we might just wind it up at least after this.
I'm looking for solutions here. And just for context, at the last planning meeting, we as councillors did specifically ask about the 30 miles an hour possibility. Unfortunately, the 6 questions that were sent to West Sussex didn't specifically mention whether they'd support 30 miles an hour. Unfortunately, the subsequent email specifically asking about 30 miles an hour has not been answered. Unfortunately, the West Sussex officer from planning is not the person within West Sussex who's able to answer that question. I don't like to waste the applicant's time or public money or anybody's money on this, but it seems to me that we do need to find a way forward here. I don't think it would be a good outcome if we rejected this application, but there is very, very serious concern about accepting it as it stands. So with a somewhat heavy heart, I think I'd like to propose that we defer this application again to look at the 30 mile an hour question. With respect to what Councillor Bevis has said, it's not great to be having a second bite at the cherry, but I tried at the last committee meeting to ask the 30 mile an hour question. I tried in between the 2 meetings to ask the 30 mile an hour question, and I've tried at this committee meeting to ask it. And the answer has not been no, the answer has just not happened. So I would like to defer for that to be to explore whether West Sussex will support 30 mile an hour speed limit. My iPad's just run out of juice, so I haven't got the exact words in front of me anymore. But it's to defer to explore with West Sussex whether they will support working with the applicant to introduce a 30 mile an hour limit along this stretch.
Thank you, Councillor. I think whilst recognise it may well have been discussed at the last meeting, I do not recall it being actually part of the reason for deferral. Recognise it has been raised since then, though. I think we did write down those particular questions, but we can obviously happy to re-look at the recording. I think officer's view is we have the answers to the questions members asked at the last meeting, and I would encourage you to make a decision, but obviously a motion has been put forward, and if that's seconded, then members will need to vote on that. Thank you.
Would anybody like to second that? Sorry. Anybody prepared to second that?
Sorry, I was going to say that I was prepared to second that, but I fear that there might be a comment from officers that waiting. So the council solicitor, was there something that you wish to say?
No, I thought you were going to second that.
No, I am going to second. Yes. Good. Okay, that was all I wanted to know. Yes. No. I'm happy to second Councillor Fletcher's proposal for deferment. I think that seems the best way forward to address this situation where, as Councillor Bevis has pointed out, we've had a very clear sense that we are getting answers that we don't like. If we give an outright refusal just on the basis that we don't like the answers that we're getting, the most likely thing, it would be as Councillor Hogman has suggested. That is liable to be appealed. We are liable to lose, have costs awarded against ourselves. We'll have wasted time, we'll have wasted public money, and we will get precisely the same outcome as an approval. I don't think anybody here wants that. That seems to be the strength of feeling in the room, and that's certainly not something that I'd like. I do think that there is a relevant question that remains unanswered from the previous discussions of the last committee, and that we ought to have that answered before we come to a final determination.
Before we go to the vote, councillors, I just want to make one final comment in terms of, obviously, you know, a developer or an applicant can an appeal a refusal, they can appeal condition, but they can also appeal non-determination. So I think we also have to recognise we are here to make timely decisions, and obviously if members feel it's necessary to defer it, then that again, it's a decision you're entitled to make, and we'll vote on it in a minute. But I just wanted to members to recognise that you can also appeal because an authority hasn't made a decision. Thank you.
Time limit on the deferral, so that it comes back to the next meeting.
Do you honestly think we're going to get a resolution from West Sussex County Council on a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit in a month?
But the motion is not the decision to be made. It's to get their response about whether they will support whether they'll support a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, and whether they will work with the applicant with a view to getting a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit.
And
So it doesn't. No, that should be able to be done within a month.
And if they were to say no, where would we be? Well, it might be, but
If they said no, we'd have to determine the application on the basis of the facts we have before us.
2 months delay. Sorry. Let's keep going. Let's get it right.
Sorry, Chair, but there is. I'd like to actually. I know. Councillor Franklin got an answer, but I'd like to be a little bit clearer, because I think the members of the Residents Association did kind of allude that this had been a discussion that they'd had, and that is everyone in the room. Mostly, I don't want to generalise, but most people in the room seem to have the problem with the exit onto the A24. That's the issue. And that was what all the questions were about, etc., etc. And most of the people in the room are still not terribly satisfied that that's been satisfactorily answered. And there are various conditions. If we go back to the council to the West Sussex County Council to defer, and they say come back for the next meeting, what happens then when they say no? We've got no room left to manoeuvre. Is it possible that we could possibly put a condition in there, and I know they can appeal conditions and all the rest of it, but that the exit from the pub is switched through the garden onto Marches Road, and then because it has already been discussed by the residents and the landlord.
No, what we can do, we have a motion. We can vote for or against the motion. Okay. If we vote against the motion, we come back with another motion and we vote on that. That's the way it works. So we have a motion. Unless there's something new to add, I suggest we vote on that motion. So one last thing from Councillor Minton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just concerned we're kicking the can down the road on this one. Equally, I don't even know if 30-mile-an-hour speed limit is the answer. That has to be applied. It has to be policed. Has to be adhered to, and I still don't think that satisfies. Taking my conscience out of it, I just am not convinced that there is a solution if that entrance is on that road. So I'm concerned we're kicking this down the road, and we're going to get to an outcome, as Councillor Brooks said, and we may not like the outcome, but I think if we've got the courage of our convictions, and we absolutely think that is not the right place for it, and I think we should go back to the original submission and vote how we feel we should vote.
We have a motion, so let's, the bottom line here is we're all fundamentally concerned about whether or not this is a street or not. Well, you know, it's not a street, is it? To be honest, it's a road, it's a main road. So we have a proposal. I suggest that we vote on that. It's been proposed and seconded, and that is to defer and give the county an opportunity to answer whether or not they're prepared to work with the applicant to discuss a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, well, to work with them to put in a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, presumably. So, all of those in favour? And those against?
Nine against.
So that motion was not carried, presumably, if there weren't. Oh, sorry, any abstentions? My mistake. No abstentions. Final numbers, please.
5 for and 9 against.
Not carried. Right, let's have the next motion, please. Okay, so we have a motion that's printed, or somebody can put forward an alternative. So the motion would be to approve. That would be to approve, would be what we've been putting forward. We'll then be voting on whether or not to approve. And if we don't approve, we'll have to come back and presumably we'll have a final motion on whether we refuse.
Shall I just come forward for a second, councillor, so members are clear? So obviously, members, the motion to defer did not pass. So there either needs to be an alternative motion put forward to that's printed in the agenda, or you vote if there is no alternative motion put forward, you vote on the motion as printed on the agenda. Thank you.
To any alternative motions?
I make a motion that this application is rejected on safety grounds.
Okay. A seconder? Councillor Minto seconded that. Well, that's pretty straightforward.
Can I just clarify, councillor Grant, it's quite a short statement there. My understanding is it's highway safety grounds,
yes,
on which you are raising concerns on.
And obviously, I mean, as I say, the fundamental thing is there that whether or not the classification of this as a street is.
Should we have due to the position of the access
Sure.
on the A24?
On the A24, yeah.
So what do you, sorry, councillor, so did you, in terms of satisfying yourself, did you want, it's not been demonstrated that it's a safe?
As it stands, not satisfied. Level safely. Road safety.
Okay, thank you.
So that is seconded by councillor Minto. So that is to reject on those grounds. All of those in favour? Against? Abstentions?
1 against.
Or 1 was it? Didn't see it. I did. Oh, sorry, I didn't. It's too close to me, bad luck.
2 abstentions.
3 abstentions. There was 4 abstentions, one opposing, and however many was approving. No, it's fine. We got it. Yep. So that's 11-4-1, is it? 11-1-4. Okay. So the motion to refuse is carried. Thank you. Right. Boreham House. TPO 1569. They have. They're very noble. But I have to say, I do feel we made the right decision.
Yeah. This one's really easy.
Okay. That was a very brief delay. So finally,
apologies, Chairman.
that's okay. Don't worry, Councillor Brooks. Can't blame you for that, mate. Item 8, TPO 1569 Boreham House, Church Street, Rudgwick.
Okay, so this item is to confirm a proposed tree preservation order for 2 oak trees at Boreham House, Church Street, Rudgwick. The 2 trees shown here, T1 and T2, are located along the northern boundary of Boreham House on the east side of Church Street at Rudgwick. And I've shown here as well an existing TPO in the adjacent garden to the north, which is also an oak tree. The report outlines that an objection has been raised to the inclusion of T2 in the order, stating that it does not meet the criteria required by a TPO. This photo shows the 2 oak trees, T1 and 2, in the garden of Boreham House along the northern boundary. And this photo is taken from the northwest of the trees, from the junction of Church Street and Highcroft, and you can see T1 and T2 there. The tree to the right there is I believe, the existing TPO in the adjacent garden. The Council's Arboriculturist has outlined that T2 is a mature oak around 23 meters in height, exhibiting a trunk diameter at chest height of 750 meters. Overall, it appears to be in good health and structural condition. The mature trees on the northern boundary of the site, including T2, are a typical example of oldfield boundary market trees that, since the post-war expansion of the village into what was historically a rural countryside setting, have found themselves within a built-up residential area. It is acknowledged that views of T2 as a standalone specimen are limited from the outside the site's boundary due to additional trees in the area. Nonetheless, it can be glimpsed from the northwest of the junction at Church Street and Highcroft villas, as you can see here. Due to their age, size and form, the trees on the northern boundary of the site have a high level of collective amenity worth when viewed within the local landscape context to which T2 makes a positive contribution. As such, the 2 trees are considered to meet the criteria for protection on amenity grounds and are recommended to be included in the TPO. It should also be noted that this application has been in response to a threat to the trees from the development of the site for housing. TPOs of these trees would help ensure their protection. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Right. 3 speakers. Kate Kennedy Clark, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm speaking today in support of the recent request by the Horsham District Council tree officer to place TPOs on trees T1 and T2. The tree T2 forms part of the corridor of similar mature oaks, creating the northern boundary between Boreham House and Wisteria Cottage, which is part of the Rudgwick Conservation Area boundary. In the first planning application from Boreham House in 2019, T2 was placed 9 metres in the incorrect position, which enabled a plan for a garage to be placed in the space that appeared. Now that the tree has been located in the correct position, it is in the way of the proposed garage for plot 2. The tree is now severely affected by the approved foundations of Unit 2 and its garage in the tree's RPA. To quote the tree officer, this is undesirable and avoidable. In addition to this, the subject of this same tree to have its crown raised to enable the building of Unit 2 only appeared in the last planning application in 2024. We are not opposed to the development of Unit 2 at Boreham House, not at all, but we do object to these trees being harmed with their potential total loss when an alternative position is possible. I understand that planning policy is to be expected to retain and enhance existing priority habitats and trees. As you can see, there is an immediate threat to the tree roots and crown, which is part of this important line of trees. Therefore, we support the Horsham District Council tree officer's recommendation to protect these trees through a TPO and ask the council to just approve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Roger Goodway, please.
Thank you, Chair, officers, members. I speak today in support of the recent request by the tree officer to place TPOs on T1 and T2, which form, as we've known, the corridor of similar mature oaks along the boundary between Boreham House and Wisteria Cottage. These trees are a valuable public arboricultural amenity, capable of extremely long life, adequately protected, and through this provide an important impact on the climate and wildlife, offering shelter to a diverse range of species and contribute greatly to the landscape and character of Rudgwick's conservation area boundary. The recent planning application DC 232142, directly related to these trees and their management, was rejected unanimously on the 9th of April 2024. The reason given by HDC being, and I quote, that the proposed amendment by virtue of its proximity to nearby trees would result in harm to the health and potential loss of the trees. The development is within the RPA of retained tree, namely T13, now classified as T12, where development is undesirable, in this case avoidable. This is contrary to policy 33 of HDC Planning Framework, paragraph 136 of the National Planning Policy Framework, your words, not mine. Further, HDC's local planning policy 17, Green Infrastructure and Biodiversity, states that proposals will be expected to retain and enhance existing priority habitats and trees in accord with the aims and objectives of the Green Infrastructure and Local Nature Recovery Strategy. Therefore, obviously, I strongly support the tree officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Councillor David Buckley from Rudgwick Parish Council, you have 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Rudgwick Parish Council fully supports the officer's intention to recommend to the committee that the TPO be confirmed. RPC considers the tree to be at significant risk. Only one key factor being the current landowner's attempt to pursue a development requiring machine-dug trench foundations well within its root protection area. This is despite the fact that such encroachment is clearly avoidable to enable the construction of the second large 4-bedroom house within the garden curtilage. RPC considers the oak tree in question, T13, 23 metres high and with a declared lifespan of 40 years, forms an important component of the tree line on the boundary overlooking the Rudgwick Conservation Area.
This view is supported by HDC landscape officer, who reported the mature trees on the northern boundary are typical of the local character area and are a recognised feature within the streetscape. Views of these trees can be seen from the edges of the conservation area and contribute to its verdant setting. As a result of this, as well as the guidelines from the landscape character assessment, it is recommended that their retention is demonstrated and the integrity of the green corridor conserved. The application DC 23-2142 included a report dated September the 23rd from St Aubin Tree Consultancy, which, among other things, classified the oak trees on the northern boundary. In that application, the trees were labelled from Church Street as T11, T12, T29, T13, T14 and T15, and classified T11, 12 and 13 as B and the rest C. Their classification designates category A trees as high quality with an estimated remaining life expectancy of at least 40 years, Cat B trees of moderate quality with an estimated remaining life expectancy of at least 20 years, and Cat C trees of low quality with an estimated remaining life expectancy of at least 10 years are young trees with a stem diameter, and Cat U trees unsuitable for retention due to their condition. This clearly shows the quality of the trees and the need for the appropriate TPOs. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, well, I suppose what we probably want to know is if anybody opposes this. Councillor Vickers.
I'm not going to oppose it, Chairman.
Just felt you had to say so.
I'm just going to speak on behalf of Councillor Yandy, who can't be here this evening.
Thank you, yes, fair
If
enough.
that's okay. He fully supports the tree officer's recommendation. He says, although the parish council wanted all the trees on the northern border to be given protected status, the officer has recommended that 2 are granted preservation orders. Most of the trees on the northern border not only predate Boreham House, but almost all the buildings at the top end of the eastern side of Church Street. As such, they have been and still are prominent features of Church Street. Opposite the conservation area, they add to the attractiveness of the area and accord with the descriptions made in the amenity assessment under paragraph 5.2. He asked the committee to support the officer's recommendation to allow the TPOs to go ahead. And I concur with his views, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Shall we just move to a vote then? I'm putting forward a motion. With a seconder. Seconded, please. All those in favour? Great. That's how to do it. Third time lucky.
Because we wanted you to get the full experience.
Yeah, sorry, that's meeting closed. What time is it, please?
20 past 8.
Meeting's closed, 20 past 8, 8:20. Thank you.
You bring your cups down, please, everyone. Thank you.